I give all praise and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahushai Bahasham, Ha'arakakodash. Double honors unto our apostle elders which rule Great Millstone Well and Shalom to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel, Wa Abba. Alright, so I'm going to go to Judith 5. Judith 5. And there's an Ammonite in here. Verse 5, it says, Then said Achor, the captain of all the sons of Ammon, the Japanese, let my lord now hear a word from the mouth of thy servant, and I will declare unto thee the truth concerning this people, talking about the Israelites, which dwelleth near thee, and inhabiteth the hill countries, and there shall no lie come out of the mouth of thy servant, which this is talking about Herlophanes, that they're serving the captain of the Assyrian military. Verse 1, Then was it declared to Herlophanes, the chief captain of the army of Ashur, which he was over the Assyrian military under Nebuchadnezzar, that the sons of Israel had prepared for war, and had shut up the passages of the hill country, and had fortified all the tops of the high hills, and had laid impediments in the campaign countries. Right, so he called all the captains of the Chinese, the Japanese, the Moabites, and the Ammonites, and the Hamites. All right, to question them about the Israelites. All right, it says in verse 6, This people are descended of the Chaldeans through Abraham, which, let's go to Ecclesiasticus 44, verse 20. It says, With Isaac, the son of Abraham, the son of promise, did he establish likewise for Abraham his father's sake the blessing of all men. The Messiah would come through the lineage of Abraham, which came through Isaac, and then Jacob, which Yahushua came as an Israelite. Abraham, his father's sake, the blessing of all men and the covenant, and made it rest upon the head of Jacob, the father of the Israelites. He acknowledged him in his blessing and gave him an heritage, which is the promised land, and divided his portions among the 12 tribes did he part them. So it goes from Abraham to Isaac. Isaac was the son of promise given to Abraham and Sarah, and then through Isaac the promise went to Jacob, and then it continued to the Israelites, the descendants of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, and this is why we're known as Israelites. He, Prince Power, Yasharallah, all right? And that power is the power of the Bible, all right? Yahweh. He gave us his word that he would save us from our troubles, and he's sending Yahweh Shai once again to save us. He paid for us the first time he came, and now he's coming to save us, all right? So let's go ahead and go back into this. Judith 5. It says in verse 7, And they sojourned heretofore in Mesopotamia. When they left their father's house, uh, Abraham, and he took his nephew Lot and his sister Sarah, it says, because they would not follow the gods of their fathers, because they were idol worshippers, which were in the land of Chaldea, which he came out of Sham, and the father of Assyria, Ashur, came out of Sham. All right, and the heathen are idol worshippers. All right, but through Abraham, Yahweh chose a people, the descendants of Isaac, Jacob, which are the Israelites, and he rejected Esau and the other nations. All right, so only the Israelites are the Lord's special people, which today are the so called Negro, Latino, and Native American Indian, which have been scattered throughout the world in slavery for many generations, according to biblical prophecy. It says in verse 8, "For they left the way of their ancestors, we sinned, and worshiped the God of heaven, the God whom they knew. So they cast them out from the face of their gods, and they fled into Mesopotamia and sojourned there many days. Then their power commanded them to depart from the place wherein they sojourned, and to go into the land of Canaan," which they brought us out of Egypt and brought us into Canaan. But that started back with Abraham. He went into the land of Canaan first, which he was given the promise first, and then he was promised a son. After he was promised the land, he was promised a son. All right, and the son Isaac had two sons, Esau and Jacob. Esau has rejected the so-called white race, and Jacob were grafted in, were adopted in through Yahweh Shai, which Yahweh Shai came as an Israelite. He didn't come as a Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, an Assyrian. He didn't come as a Hamite. He came as an Israelite to save us from what? The wage of our sin. We sinned. All right? And Abraham, he was obedient because of his faith. He went into that land of Canaan, which was promised to him. All right? And that promise went to Isaac. And then from Isaac to Jacob. And now to the sons of Jacob, which are the Israelites. First with the fathers, and now with us and the sons in the later generation. All right? It says, "Then their power commanded them to depart from the place where they sojourned, and to go into the land of Canaan, where they dwelt, and were increased with gold and silver, and with very much cattle." All right, which the Israelites were in that land, and because of famine, they had to go into Egypt. Right, that was during the time of Joseph. All right, that's why Joseph was able to rise up into a position of power, second to Pharaoh, and have food to give to his brothers and father. It says, "But when a famine covered all the land of Canaan, they went down into Egypt and sojourned there while they were nourished, and became there a great multitude." We multiplied in oppression under the Egyptians because they enslaved us. All right, after they forgot who we were. It tells you that. So that one could not number their nation, and they were afraid of us. Therefore the king of Egypt rose up against them, and dealt subtly with them. And that's what the Edomites did. Just like the Egyptians. That's why you have Nero 47, known as the king of Egypt, the king of Babylon, because he's moving in the pride of these heathen. All right, though he's an Edomite, Nero 47, all right, they're moving like the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh against the Israelite. They don't want to let us go. They're moving like Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Assyria, which he wanted the world to worship him as a god, which Pharaoh did too. Pharaoh thought he was a god. All right. It says, "Therefore the king of Egypt rose up against them, and dealt subtly with them, and brought them low with laboring in brick, and made them slaves." Just like now in America, spiritual Egypt, all right, under the king of Babylon, we are slaves in America, subject to payment. Then they cried unto, hey, look at Mayweather. He's supposed to be $1 billion man, and he's got a felony for $1,000 check. He's supposed to have people cashing them checks for him, right? His money is not to get slow. Really, if you understand money, just having so much money in a bank, you could live off the interest. But it's because we're the slaves. We're not the slave master. we're the slaves, so they're able to take your money away from you. Look at Kanye West. All right, Kanye West. They took his billions of dollars away one day in 1 hour. It says, "Then they cried unto their God, and he smote all the land of Egypt with incurable plagues, so the Egyptians cast them out of their sight," which is happening now. All right, they're gonna push us out of our homes and persecute us, but it's gonna bring the condemnation of Babylon the Great. All right, spiritual Egypt. All right, because the only reason the Lord don't destroy this spiritual Sodom and Gomorrah, America, is because the Israelites are here. Once they start to oppress us unto death, it's going to be their end. All right, according to biblical prophecy. Excuse me. It says, verse 13, and you got to remember they're already doing that. That's why they got the Ice Cube and Ice T program. That's why they're taking away civil rights. That's why they're talking about trying to cut us out of the citizenship of America. Even the Native Americans, which are the tribe of Gad, right? They're trying to say that their citizenship is void because they're trying to push us out, cast them out of their sight, just like the Egyptians in the past. It says, "And our power dried the Red Sea before them." And he did this through Moses, "and brought them to Mount Sinai and Kadesh Barnea, and cast forth all that dwelt in the wilderness." I'll put this in the Google search. All right, and so what he's referring to is a location where Yahweh came down in a chariot and spoke with Moses. All right, which you can see the reference, brought them to Mount Sinai, which is actually Mount Horeb, where the chariot landed and Moses received the 10 Commandments, which he received more than 10. It says, and Kadesh Barnea refers to Kadesh Barnea. It is located in the wilderness of the southern border of Canaan. All right. So it's a location that he's referring to where the chariot came down and Yahweh spoken to us. All right. So that you understand, let's go to Isaiah 19. Which, once again, like I said, this is happening again. All right. We're in captivity together in spiritual Egypt, in America, Babylon the Great, and we're crying unto Yahweh our power by Hashem Yahweh Shai, through Yahweh Shai and the Holy Spirit, and Yahweh is remembering us. This is why we're crying unto his name. He gave us the remembrance of his name through the Holy Spirit of his Son, the Spirit of prophecy. It says in Isaiah 19, verse 1, the burden of Egypt. Now, this is talking about America, but this is what happened to Egypt in the past. "Behold, Yahweh rideth upon a swift cloud," and it's talking about the chariot, the so-called UFOs, which is a throne fit for judgment. Fire comes out of the bottom and burns people, places, and things. It says, "And shall come into Egypt," which, once again, he heard us cry in ancient Egypt and delivered us out. The chariot was what led us out. And then the prophecies of these later Egypt, America, which is spiritual Egypt. Look at the back of your dollar. Look at the monuments in your capitals. Look at your president. He's inaugurated. This is in the image of Egypt. This is how the Greeks and Romans operated in the past, which were Edomites. It says, "And the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it," which this Egypt is going to be destroyed by fire. ancient Egypt did not get destroyed with fire. In fact, if you understand the map, all right, Egypt is a portion of the promised land given to the Israelites because of the Nile River being one of the borders set by Yahweh for the Holy Land. All right? So these heathen are in our land and they oppress us right now with Edom, the so called white race, and they have their king, Nero 47, the king of Babylon. All right? We're in spiritual Egypt in hard bondage, right? And we're oppressed by the king of Egypt, which is a cruel lord. All right? That's why you have the spirit of Egypt failing, the dollar being devalued, the inflation is increasing. All right? It says in verse 2, and I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother and every one against his neighbor. Which this didn't happen in ancient Egypt. This is a prophecy of modern Egypt. All right, America. Why? Because of famine and for great tribulation. City against city, because you got a division in their party system, the Democrat and the Republican. Uh, it says, and kingdom against kingdom, right? So there's going to be tensions on every level, all right? Even world international powers are at war. We're in World War III right now. It just ends with America's nuclear destruction. It says, and the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof, which is failing right now. There's no more jobs. A lot of people are saying, why even go to college and get a degree? Because there's no future here. And I will destroy the counsel thereof, which no one trusts the media anymore. And they shall seek to the idols and to the charmers and to them that have familiar spirits and to the wizards, which there's many false prophets, like Nero 47. All right, Maga goes back to the Magi that was amongst the Chaldees of Babylon. All right, so really these Edomites are just moving in the magic of Egypt and the Assyrians, which they took when they were Greeks and Romans, which now, after the Renaissance, the rebirth of the so called white race, because they became like cave people, Neanderthals, for 1,000 years after they fell, after Rome fell, and it was known as the Dark Ages when dark skinned people ruled. All right, now in the Renaissance, the rebirth of the so called white race is coming to an end. All right, and so this is why everything is failing. Their dollar is failing, their religion is failing, their military is failing, their health is failing. All right. It says, and the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel lord, talking about Nero 47. And a fierce king shall rule over them, saith the Lord Yahweh of hosts. All right. So he gave them the cruel lord, the spirit of Egypt. The spirit of Egypt is crumbling. Why? Because the Israelites are crying to Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai, because Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai remember the Israelites and the promise that he made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is now with the Israelites. All right? So we have a sure word of prophecy, and you would do well if you took heed. And you know the mystery by knowing the history. All right? So once again, let's go back down. It says, verse 15, Judah 5, verse 15. So they dwelt in the land of the Amorites, and they destroyed by their strength all them of Esebon, and passing over Jordan, they possessed all the hill country. So this is the Israelites coming out of Egypt. All right, and we conquered the Hamites that were in the land of Canaan, and we took the land by force under the commandment of Yahweh Bahasham Yahushai. All right, Joshua, you can read in the book of Joshua, he literally met Yahweh Shai, the captain, the chief captain of the host of heaven, which he told him to go in there and circle Jericho and yell, and the Lord would have favor on him, and the walls would fall. All the way through us getting into that land, King David and then King Solomon, where they built the temple in Jerusalem. It was all prophesied, and it's all history now, all right? But we're going back into that land again, but through the chariots. Yahweh Shai is coming back from heaven with chariots, so called UFO, just like his father rides a chariot fit for judgment. It says, verse 16, and they cast forth before them the Canaanite, the Pharisite, and the Jebusite, and the Simeonite, Simeonite. Let's see if I can get it read. Why doesn't it do it in this one? Let me pull it up. I'm gonna pull it up on my other phone. Let me pull it up. How to say it, so I can say it correctly. Which these are Hamites. All right, that were in that land, the promised land. Let's see. Let me turn up the volume on my phone. It's a commercial. Shechemites. Shechemites. All right. Shechemites. It says, and all the Girgashites, and they dwelt in the country many days. And whilst they sinned not before their power, they prospered, because of the power that hateth iniquity was with them, Yahweh. And now we've been forgiven of all our sin through his son Yahweh Shai. But when they departed from the way which he appointed them, we became sinners. They were destroyed in many battles, very sore, and were led captives into a land that was not theirs. And the temple of their power, the temple that King Solomon built, was cast to the ground, and their cities were taken by the enemies. See, so when we sinned, we went into captivity under the heathen. You see? But when we're in the way, the righteous way with Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, all right, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai is with us, and no one could defeat us. This is why the heathen are very afraid today. They're looking at the history, and they know the mystery of us prophesying and how detrimental it's to their health, and that's why they're trying to come down with great wrath, knowing that they have but a short time. Great fear fell upon them which saw them. Saw them what? The Israelites stand upon their feet with great wisdom, knowledge, understanding, and discernment through the Holy Spirit, the spirit of prophecy. It says in verse 19, but now are they returned to their power, Yahweh, and are come up from the places where they were scattered, and have possessed Jerusalem, where their sanctuary is, and are seated in the hill country, for it was desolate. Now therefore, my lord and governor, which this is a Japanese man talking to an Assyrian man, Holofernes, the captain of the Assyrian army under Nebuchadnezzar. It says, if there be any error against this people, against the Israelite, and they sin against their power, Yahweh, let us consider that this shall be their ruin, and let us go up, and we shall overcome them. See? But if there be no iniquity in their nation, that and this is why the 2/3 gotta die, because they're caught up in iniquity. In America, right? They're in love with the whore, and they worship the beast in his image. It says, "Let my Lord now pass by, lest their Lord defend them, and their power be for them, and we become a reproach before all the world," which is going to happen to Babylon the Great. That's why it says in Revelation that the whole world is going to mourn when Babylon the Great is destroyed. Revelation 17. All right, it says, "And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore, America, that sitteth upon many waters," which America is a melting pot of nations. You have the UN here in America, all right, and they control the world through the beast system. America, which is the whore that rides the beast. The beast is the European Union, which has teeth, NATO, and their allies is the UN, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. They commit idolatry, right? They promote abominations, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Talking about the witchcraft of this place, their false religions. All right. So the whole world is drunk on this witchcraft. All right. Which the Lord is going to destroy the whore by its allies. It says in verse 11, "And the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth, America, which comes out of the European Union," right? And it's in the reincarnation of Rome, "and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition." All right, which those 7 countries, the European Union, they had power before America. All right, but America replaced the wounded head, the head that was wounded to death, Rome. All right, and it came out of all these Edomite countries: Spain, France, Britain, Germania Major, Germania Minor, Greeks, and Romans. All right, so it says, "And goeth into perdition." America, its future is destruction, nuclear destruction. "And the 10 horns which thou sawest are the 10 kings, the European Union, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast," which are confederate. You just saw the UK, I believe, is the prime minister here shaking hands with Nero 47, right? So they're all confederate against who? The Israelite. "These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast." This is why they have these secret societies amongst the nations against the Israelites. It says, "These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings." When Yahweh Shai comes back, he's taking the power from the heathen away that he gave him. Like Esau, he blessed him with the sword. "And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful, which the dead shall rise first, and then them that are living that believe in Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, which are ordained to be saved," which is only a remnant of Israelites. It says, "And he saith unto me, The waters which thou sawest where the whore sitteth are people and multitude and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns, which is the European Union with NATO, which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire." Which it tells you that they're going to team up with Russia, the Medes. Let's see, Ezekiel 38. Right here it says, verse 6, Gomer and all his bands, the house of Tagarma of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee, be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Which, remember, Germany had a pipeline with Russia, an oil pipeline, or a natural gas pipeline that they said America destroyed. But he's going to be a guard unto them, and he's going to be given the power to destroy America with nuclear missiles, and he's going to lead these allies and enemies of America into destroying the uh, the great whore with nuclear fire. Isaiah 13 and verse 17. Behold, I will stir up the Medes, which are the Russians today, against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. Remember, it's going crypto. Their, it says, their bows, which is their silos where their missiles come out of, shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. So pregnant women, old people, young people, it don't matter. They're all going to die here in America. Their eyes shall not spare children. Talking about these missiles. When these nuclear missiles devour the flesh of America, they're not going to separate men from women. Women, again, children, they're not going to get no mercy. It's going to be poured out without mercy. The whole America is going to be turned into a nuclear lake of fire. And Babylon, the glory of the kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, which it's built in witchcraft against the Israelites. It's literally an experiment against the Israelites. Shall be as when our power overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. So fire is going to rain down from heaven on earth, and it's going to destroy America, the great whore, and turn it into a lake of fire. 2/3 of the reprobate Israelites will be with them, for the unfaithful shall die in their unfaithfulness. But the faithful shall be saved and put back into the promised land, which this is our heritage, the promise of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, which is given now to Israel. It says in Isaiah 14:1, For Yahweh will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land, which is the promised land. And the strangers, the Israelites, this is why we have internet, because we're prophesying on the internet, and you got Israelites scattered throughout the world speaking different languages amongst the heathen, and they're listening to the videos and believing so that they could be saved. They're ordained to be saved. Revelation 7 and 9. You got Israelites that are going to be gathered throughout the whole world to be delivered from the nuclear destruction of America, which is going to shake the whole entire earth. All right, it says, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. They're going to believe on Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in their land of Yahweh for servants and handmaids. The other nations are going to be our slaves, just as we were devoured by them. And they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors, which we're going to have all the heathen, from the Egyptian, the Assyrian, the Mede, the Persian, the Greek, the Roman, which really there's only 18 nations, all right, and all these nations are mingled together under the so-called white race. So that's why the Lord's going to only allow a small population of all the races to survive the nuclear destruction of America, and Israel will rule over them. They're going to be our slaves. Them that survived the nuclear destruction, which are going to be in bunkers and in caves, they're going to crawl out like worms, and they're going to be enslaved by the Israelites that come down out of heaven, out of what they know as so-called UFOs, with new bodies. All right. It says, and it shall come to pass in the day that Yahweh shall give thee rest from thy sorrow and from thy fear and from the hard bondage wherein thou was made to serve, which we were put here because of our sin. But really, when you go deeper, it was all prophecy. It behooved Yahweh to send Yahweh Shai as our Savior. So this is a setup for Yahweh to send Yahweh Shai back to save us from trouble. That thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon. So we're prophesying against Babylon the Great and telling the king of Babylon, Nero 47, and say, how had the oppressor ceased, the golden city ceased? Which, when we get into the kingdom of heaven, all the Edomites, all the other nations are going to be enslaved under us. So we're going to taunt them. All right? In fact, that's what this chapter is named, Israel's taunt. We're going to taunt the heathen because they're going to be our slaves. What's up with all this shit you were talking before? Right? These Edomites, instead of surrendering and submitting to our authority in Yahweh Ba'Shem Yashai, they're plotting to try to murder us. And that's what all the nations have done. Confederate with the so-called white race, the sword of the Lord, the wicked. It says, Yahweh hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. It says in Malachi 3, verse 6, for I am Yahweh, I change not, therefore ye sons of Jacob are not consumed. This is why he gave us the Messiah. Matthew 1, verse 21. It says, and she, talking about Mary, which was of the tribe of Judah, shall bring forth a son by Joseph, which was of the tribe of Judah, and thou shalt call his name, it says Jesus, which is a goddamn lie. It's Yahweh Shai, for he shall save his people from their sins. Salvation is for the Israelites. The Israelites need to be saved from the Edomites, from the other nations which are trying to devour us. All right, go to Jeremiah 50. It says, verse 6, my people, the Israelites, have been lost sheep. Their shepherds have caused them to go astray. They have turned them away on the mountains amongst these other nations. They have gone from mountain to hill. They lied to us and said that we were all different. The so-called Negro, the so-called Latino, and the so-called Native American Indian, when in fact we're the same people. It says they have forgotten their resting place. They lied to us. They put counterfeits in our land, tiny tops, big-nosed bastards. Right? They say we're nothing, that we're Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians. See, so they literally made us forget that we're the Israelites. It says all that found them have devoured them, talking about the other nations. And their adversaries said, we offend not, because they have sinned against the Lord, Yahweh. See, so that's their plan. This is why they put fat in our food. That's why they put blood in our food. That's why they defile our bread, as it was prophesied among the heathen, right? We would live under the shadow of the heathen, but in the truth, we would remember ourselves again. See, the habitation of justice, even Yahweh, the hope of their fathers. But where does Yahweh dwell on earth? It's within his men. Revelation 21, verse 3. It says, and I heard a great voice out of heaven, saying, behold, the tabernacle of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai is with men, which are Israelite men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and Yahweh himself shall be with them and be their power. And Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Which, when Yahweh sends his son Yahweh Shai, we're going to get new bodies that do not die. And then we're going to get the heathen for slaves. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. He said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. Which, what does it say? There's a new heaven and a new earth. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, which the Israelites that are the slaves now are going to rule over the heathen, which are in power now. They're going to be our slaves in the future to come. That's why they're building bunkers. That's why they're paying off soldiers, all right, which they did this in the past against us, all right, and we already know how that turned out. Yahweh was always for us, all right, but he's going to allow the sword, the wicked, to slaughter many Israelites that are unfaithful. It says in Revelation 18, when this place is destroyed, it's the Lord avenging us. It says, I'll start at verse 19, and they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, America, Babylon the great whore, wherein we are made rich, all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. So in 1 hour, Russia, the allies of America, and its enemies are going to team up and shoot nuclear missiles on Babylon the great whore. In one day, in 1 hour, America is going to be turned into a lake of fire and be no more. It says, Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for our power, Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai, hath avenged you on her. See? So he's paying them back for what they did unto us. It says in Revelation 18:20, NLT version, Rejoice over her fate. Right? It hasn't happened yet, but we know that this is the future of Babylon, and we're rejoicing over it. O heaven and people of Yahweh, which are the Israelites, and apostles and prophets, which were given to the Israelites. For at last our power has judged her for your sakes. See? So this is why they're afraid, because we're standing on our feet, telling them their fate. And they're going to persecute us. Unto death, some of us, but some of us, they can't even put us to death. It says, verse 21, And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea of people, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all, because they intend to violate his elect. Who could lay a charge against his elect? Who could do anything against his elect if Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai is for us? And he is. But see, the heathen, instead of surrendering to us, they want to try to murder us, lie about us. So they're going to get that poured out upon their head, right? What does it say? It says in Galatians 6, it says in 7, Be not deceived, Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai Baha Rakakodash is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he reap. That shall he also reap. That's why they're going to receive a violent end, because they have plans of trying to violate us and murder us, trying to, extend their end, which they have a set date. They have an expiration date. Their kingdom is going to go down, and then they're going to go into slavery, starting with their elite, and then there's an extinction date. And this is all according to biblical prophecy. Isaiah 14 and 21. Isaiah 14 and verse 21. It says, Prepare slaughter. See, we're rejoicing in the fate of Babylon the Great. So the heathen are being told, And that's how we prepare them for slaughter. We're telling them for his sons, for the iniquity of their fathers, for what they did unto us, which was violence, murder, robbery, lying. All right, they're going to be punished for it. That they do not rise nor possess the land nor fill the face of the world with cities. Look what the so-called white race did to the world. All right, look what it has done to the world as it ruled the world. What did it do? It ruled the world in wickedness. It says, "For I will rise up against them, saith Yahweh of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name and remnant and son and nephew, saith Yahweh." He's going to extinct them. "I will also make it a possession for the bittern and pools of water, and I will sweep it with the besom of destruction, saith Yahweh of hosts," which is going to be wiped off the face of the earth by nuclear fire. Shalom to the elect of the nation of Israel. Wa Abba Babal.